Hello and welcome back to Bluebaggers Edge. As you can hear from my voice, a little bit husky and for good reason, because again, I was at the game supporting the boys, yelling like a maniac, wearing my heart on my sleeve and coming away with another loss. I will start with positives. I'll say that our performance in, I will say, probably 3 quarters, probably 2.5 quarters, was probably our best, most consistent. But then you think back to like the first half of the Richmond game, and it's like, well, no, that was actually our best performance. And then it's kind of just, it evaporates. You know, when you look at the second halves and our inability to run out games, our inability to continue scoring, and our inability to limit the opposition from scoring and kicking a winning score. A consistent theme across all 3 games thus far is we've hit the lead at some stage or another, and we've given up the lead at various stages. So that's a really, really big issue. Let's have a look at the stats. Let's flick across. So final score, Carlton 11-9-75 to the Western Bulldogs 12-11-83. 20 scoring shots to 23 scoring shots. Let's have a look at the breakdown quarter by quarter, and tells the tale. I mean, look at the worm. In our favour for what you'd say 90% at the very, least of the match in our favour. But when the final siren blows and you're not ahead, that's where it counts. I think, again, the sustainability, as you can see there in terms of scoring, we lasted, two quarters and maybe, 75% of the third quarter. Then we got the lead back again. So you could probably say that, yeah, this game was probably the one of the 3 where we were the most consistent, with an asterisk, of course, because we weren't. But as you can see there, breakdown quarter by quarter. 4 goals, 327 to the Bulldogs, 4 behinds, and they were missing gettable goals as well. And you just knew. I mean, sitting at Marvel in our reserve seat, we have regulars in front of us, obviously, and regulars behind us. And a couple of guys that sit behind us, their father and son, good blokes. And when we went into the quarter break, 23 points up, we said, like we all collectively said, that the Dogs are going to come back. Halftime, obviously the Dogs did come back to an extent. We went into that halftime break with an 18-point lead. And again, we said the Dogs are going to come back. They're gonna start, converting the opportunities, which they did in the third quarter. We kicked another 3 goals, 2 in the second quarter. The Bulldogs kicked 4 goals, 1. So they were converting opportunities. And then this is where we fell to bits. So 7 goals in the first half, 4 goals in the second half. Same theme. Week after week, falling in a heap after the halftime break. And then when it comes to restricting scores, the Dogs kicked 4 goals, 5 up until halftime. From then on, they tripled virtually the amount of goals that they had scored up until that point. They kicked another 8 goals on top of that to finish with 12-11-83. So they kicked 3 goals, 4 in the last quarter. We kicked 2 goals straight. And it was really at that point where skill errors started to mount. the Dogs finding themselves in space when they shouldn't have. Stoppages inside defensive 50. I think we conceded maybe 2-3 goals, crucial goals. You hate to mention it, but it was part of the game, so we have to. There was at least 2 or 3 goals that came courtesy of free kicks given to the Bulldogs inside forward 50. And I would say at least 2 of those were probably very, very iffy. And I say iffy in the context of, the same scenarios being paid against us or not being paid in our favour. So again, that lack of consistency. And you hate to pinpoint it, but really it does play a part to some degree. You don't want to, again, blame the umpires because I'm not about that. But it did play, some sort of role. Didn't dictate the win, that's for sure. That was from our lack of skill set, lack of concentration, lack of structure, and probably lack of fitness as well. What I will say, and one thing that is kind of damning here, just speaking to that as we scroll down, looking at the interchanges made. Went to the footy with my father-in-law, also a massive Baggers man. And he was commenting on the amount of rotations that we were making, because where we sit is kind of situated on the wing, sort of flank, just down from the Carlton bench. And we could see the players running on and off. And he mentioned the amount of rotations that we were having, like it was just incredible. But what's even more incredible is post-game, seeing the amount of interchanges that we made in comparison to the Dogs. We actually made 10 less. And yet it was evident that we were running off our legs. We didn't have the fitness to run out the game. So why is it we did not maximise our interchanges and have 10 less than the Bulldogs? And then factoring in as well, obviously, Zach Williams going off injured. Probably subbed earlier than what we would have liked to have made a sub at that point in the game. So you one less rotation on the bench, because Williams, you'd think in terms of where he was playing, he would have rotated quite a bit. But again, what are we doing? How are we not managing this in terms of fitness? Because it's evident we can't run out games, despite what Voss says. And as he said in the press conference last week, that have no doubt about it, we can run out games. Well, Vossy, mate, you might want to reassess that, because we did not run out a game. Again, 3rd week in a row. So why are you telling lies, blatant lies? Because it's obvious we cannot run out games. We do not have the fitness, the structure, the setup, the ball movement plan that you are implementing is not sustainable for 4 quarters of footy. It is evident. So why is it not evident to you? Why are you coming out and saying the opposite when it is clear that what you are trying to implement is not working? Like, we look like world beaters in the first half. And we did against the Richmond, in round 1, obviously. And to some degree, conditions probably dictated the way that the game was played against Hawthorn, but there were patches there where we actually looked okay, limited patches at that. But just not good enough. Falling in a heap in the second half. You cannot win games of footy by playing a half of footy. And, I think back to 2024, and there were actually, hints back then, early season when we were actually in half decent form, where the situation we find ourselves in now, there were breadcrumbs, you could probably say, in 2024 of this happening, except we found ourselves in fortunate, scenarios where we actually squandered leads, but not to the point of losing the lead and losing games. We did it against North Melbourne. That's one game that pops into my head. There was a game against, was it Hawthorn where they came back? And we just held on. It might have been Melbourne, sorry. Apologies. And And I think that was kind of papering over the cracks. And what we're seeing now is what we probably were, I guess probably should have been seeing more often, but we're just fortunate through luck in holding on to these leads in 2024. And what we're seeing now is the same as the back end of 2024, not being able to run out games, panic under pressure, all that sort of stuff. Let's have a look closer at stats and speak to that a little bit more. I will mention just quickly positives because there were some. We can't be, just dwelling on the negatives because there were positives. The big one, and I spoke about it in the preview to this game, in terms of the key matchup with Sam Darcy and Jacob Wiedering playing on him. Because in my eyes, Lewis Young, he played up forward, but even though he could probably match him for height to an extent, he doesn't have the skill set, speed off the mark, or strength to quell Sam Darcy. And so my thought was what played out, which was good to see in playing Jacob Wiedering, the stronger-bodied opponent to Sam Darcy, who's more, I guess, flimsy and playing body on body, because Wieders gave up a fair bit of height, but to his credit, absolutely smashed Darcy to the point where Darcy was having a bit of a Nick Dacos moment, I'll call it. And, I'm referring to the fact that Dacos at times, when he doesn't get his way, throws the toys out of the cot, throws his arms out, looks at the umpire and says, why haven't I been given a free kick? And in the case of Sam Darcy, there was a moment there where he juggled the ball, didn't complete the mark, and straight away dropped the ball, looked at the umpire, arms out, and like a petulant child demanding that the mark be paid, despite the fact they didn't actually complete the mark, and then got into Wiedering and cracked the shits. And Wieders, for us, was incredible. Best on ground. Cripper, did Cripper things, really. But then defensively as well, another one we can shout out is Sauce. Played the entire game in defence, and I'm disappointed in myself for not saying that he was a best 23 player, and he might have probably been best served to play the opening portion of 2025 in the VFL to just get his fitness up and everything else, because his return to senior footy has been probably one of the shining lights of season 2025. Not just his ability up forward, but his, I guess the speed of him adapting to playing in defence, a role that he hasn't been playing longer term in, obviously, is just really, hats off to the bloke. Because without him, we would be struggling a fair bit, I think. And the demands of him being swung forward and then back and adapting, not dropping his head, all that sort of stuff. He was incredible tonight. Incredible. Lewis Young, he is, obviously a whipping boy. His game up forward, I think, was probably one of his better games in recent times. Kicked a couple of goals, looked good, good marking overall, and kicked a couple of, classy goals. So tip of the cap to him as well. Brody Kemp, incredible. What was it, 5 goals? Just really, really solid game. And the sort of game that I have said, I'm a big advocate of him playing forward. And it's games like this that really vindicate my thinking behind that. And I do think he I think he can play both ends, but I do think he is better served for us up forward. And in light of Harry being out of the team, he's definitely stood up. So again, tip the cap to him. Charles looked really good. He was on fire early, and it was just great to see him get some early goals, boost his confidence, especially off the back of last week when it was a trying game for him. Obviously, lack of fitness, everything else. So there were snippets there of the old Charlie, which was incredible, up and about, the old flex. So really, really, really good to see. Outside of that, there were patches, there were moments from guys. Zachy Williams, he's dashed through the middle and, kicking long to, I think it was Kempy, who ended up marking, goaling, looked incredible. Doherty, it was another trying game, I think, for Doc. And we all love Doc. We all love him. But yeah, it was a tough game for Doc. Cotters looked good, various patches. Jesse, yeah. TDK, incredible. I mean, whatever he's demanding, give him the coin. He is an incredible player. An incredible player. Let's have a quick look at the stats just to sort of pay a bit more homage to the really standout performances. 28 disposals from TDK, 7 clearances, 28 hitouts, 8 marks, 4 tackles. Just, he has become the player that we're all hoping he would be when we drafted him. He is our number one ruck. There is no doubt about it. There is no ifs, buts, maybes. He is our number one ruck. And if he was to leave, knock on wood he doesn't, but if he was to leave, that would literally gut the entire team. Because without him, I mean, it's strange to say, but we would actually be in a worse spot. I know we're not winning games, but he's giving us the best opportunity to win games. So just an incredible performance. Georgie Hewitt tries his guts out. Defensively, really good. Walshy had patches of, form. Ches, another good game. Even Haynes, I think, played a really good game. Took 10 marks, and a lot of those as well were really, really good. Transition marks and intercept marks as well, which was good to see. Spoke about Sauce. Weeders, incredible. Sorry, I said Weeders is probably best on ground. It's probably between him and TDK because both of these guys are just crazy, crazy good. Kempy, another one, 5 goals, 1. But then it drops away from there. It drops away. Boydie, I will talk about selection now. Boydie as the sub, I don't know what we're getting at. Why was he brought in to then play? And I think, if Zachy didn't get injured earlier on, he probably would have stuck around on the bench and not been activated until the last quarter, even the last half of the last quarter. I just don't know what we're getting at here. Looking at the bench going into the game, I thought Frankie Evans, lucky to really get a game, shouldn't be playing, but got a game. And I thought maybe he is the sub. Nope, Jordan Boyd. The guy who is probably one of our better kicks in our team, still provides run and dash, and, I think would have really offered a fair bit if he played the entire game. And Frankie Evans, he's a trier. He's a trier. But literally, he is a Ratio Fantasia 2.0. Even more so in the context of when I sought this by time on ground, Orazio was averaging around about 60 to 65% time on ground, which is equivalent to virtually having, almost half a player. Scrolling all the way down, and what have we got? Time on ground, 61%. That's only marginally more than Jordan Boyd, who was subbed on. And obviously, the lowest was Zach Williams being subbed off. Now, if we have a player playing 61% of the game time who isn't a starting sub or the player that's been subbed on, what are we doing? If he's coming to the team to play a role as a primary forward defensive player and he's playing 61% of the game, why is he playing? What is he offering outside of defensive pressure? He had 7 disposals. Flashbacks to Orazio in 2024 did fuck all most games. And this is like the height of my frustration when it comes to, and we saw it last year in terms of the way the players were selected, the team lists, everything else, and it's happening again. And it falls on the coaches and the selection committee, team selection committee, which is the coaching staff. Just not good enough. If this bloke is in the team next week, just pack it up. You've got obviously no idea. Pack it up. We don't need another defensive forward player. We've already got one in Lockie Fogarty. We do not need another. Jesse Motlop should be playing that role. He should be honing his craft as not just an attacking small forward, but also a defensive small forward. And we saw patches of that, to his credit, in a couple of stages tonight, and even more so the previous week. So what I've seen from Jesse, despite the fact it's small, there are some positives there for him. And we have to persist due to the fact that we don't have, again, the depth of small forwards. But the fact that we have to rely on the likes of a Francis Evans, a bloke that has been a reject, a bloke that has had his papers stamped from two other teams in Port Adelaide and Geelong. Would you just think that they made a mistake? Like, oh, no, you shouldn't have been delisted. You're actually an all right guy. You're an all right player. If that was the case, if he filled a role and did that role to his best ability, he would still be on either of their lists. Not good enough. But more than that, the ins and outs, and I spoke about it in the preview episode. Jordan Boyd in, yes. As a sub, why? What an absolute waste. Francis Evans, why? What is he offering? And the outs. Lucas Camporelli. Now, we looked very, very one-paced again. And Lucas provides that bit of speed, that injection off the wing. And Cooper Lord. Geez, who was the bloke that really, really came to life in the second half for the Bulldogs and helped secure the win for him? Let's have a look at the team sheets. Yes, the familiar name. This bloke here, number 8, Matt Kennedy. Geez, he would have been an incredible inclusion tonight. Incredible. Who we virtually sold for a drop pie. That was his trade value. And we were so willing to get rid of him because of the fact that, we've got Cooper Lord, who has, to his credit, shown a heap of promise and shows that he does belong at senior level. But where is he? Oh, wait, there he is. He's out of the team. And even prior to that, the previous 2 weeks, oh, wait, he's been subbed off. Oh, wait, he's the starting sub. This is a guy who was heralded as, and it's no slight on Cooper Lord at all because he should be in the team. That's what I'm saying here. It's a slight on Michael Voss and the coaching staff because you've removed a key piece in the engine room in Matt Kennedy and replaced him with no one. Cooper Lord should be in the team. Cooper Lord is the next generation for Carlton's engine room. If he, again, is not in the team next week, pack it up. Just pack it up. It's virtually, it seems to me like it's self-sabotage in a sense, that they're making these ridiculous moves at the selection table, making these dumb moves and shooting ourselves in the foot. Francis Evans. Is it a coincidence that he's another Port reject, much like Orazio Fantasia? Voss has that connection there, obviously being an assistant coach at the Power. Is he being paid? And I'm being a bit facetious here, but is he being paid by Port Power to sabotage Carlton by bringing in these Port rejects? Maybe. There's no other logical explanation to it, really. So it kind of makes these outlandish, jovial comments, gives it an element of truth, I reckon. But let's have a look at the stats. Disposals. So the Dogs ended up having 22 more disposals than us. Kicks, 2 more in the favour of the Dogs. 20 more handballs in favour of the Dogs. Inside 50s, again. Groundhog Day. 56, we had 5 more than the Dogs. 56, would have been good to have maybe 40 scoring shots off the back of that, maybe even 30 if we lower expectations. What do we have? 20. Again, inefficiency inside 50. In having said that, granted, there actually were moments where we were hitting up opponents on leads. We weren't just aimlessly bombing it in for 99% of the game. So I will say that in terms of the setup, structure, it looked better. It did look better, but not to the extent of what we were hoping it to be. Because there were moments there when pressure was applied where, again, we just bombed it. We just bombed it. And without any purpose or intent. And that's what happened. The Dogs have a really good defensive setup, slingshotted it out of there with ease. Disposal efficiency, 3.5% in favour of the Dogs. Efficiency inside 50, and it gets back to what I was just talking about there. 33.9% for us, 47.1% for the Dogs. Free kicks were in their favour by 3, but I will admit that I think I looked at the free when I was looking at the stats at halftime. The free kick count was 14-7 in our favour. You know, it's always a common thing that's said, like the umpires always even it up, and I think they do to some extent, but geez, they evened it up. And you know, a lot of those were just uncharacteristic mistakes on our end as well. So you can't say that you know, the free kicks we gave away were not there, because they were there. But I'd be intrigued to see how many free kicks were paid to the Dogs inside forward 50 that converted to goals. I can guarantee that would be the difference as well. There were moments there where I think Sam Darcy was given a free kick inside forward 50 when he probably shouldn't have, due to holding, which wasn't there. But anyway, uncharacteristic errors, mistakes from us as well. They contributed to those free kicks. Hitouts, they were in the Dogs' favour by 3. Centre clearances, 3 in our favour. Centre clearances, 2 in our favour. Stoppage clearances, 1 in our favour. So, I mean, in terms of the work that we were doing in the middle, was pretty good. And I will say to that point as well, in terms of our setup, it was actually pretty good at various stages, especially in the first half, where, you know, Walsh would kind of sit out the back of stoppage, and I wish I could get the KO vision up here to really demonstrate that, but you'll just have to go back and have a look. But there were moments there where either, you know, Chairs or Hewitt, you know, got their first, you know, possession, got their hands on the ball from the stoppage and handballed it to Walsh, who was by himself out the back of stoppage, you know, goal side of the Dogs. And that setup persisted for a fair while and to great effect. And then I think Bevo swung a bit of a move there and we didn't have that out. So again, gets back to that lack of plan B. When it's countered by the opposition coach, what do? Nothing. Possession, contested possessions were 6 in favour of the Dogs. And again, an area, Groundhog Day, yet again, uncontested possessions in favour of the Dogs to the tune of 28. Allowing them time and space to find the ball when it mattered, which was, especially in the last quarter, which wasn't good enough. Turnovers, we had 3 more than the Dogs. And yeah, you know, possession in the last quarter, they dominated. Marks, 1 in our favour. Marks inside 50, which was a really good positive. As I said, we were kind of hitting up our forwards a bit better. You know, I can think of moments when each of Kempy, Curnow and Youngie were all marking on the lead, which was good to see. So marks inside forward 50, 4 in our favour. Contested marks, again, 4 in our favour. Excuse the voice. And time in front, look at that. It just rips your heart out, really. 15 minutes and 3 seconds they were in front for. We were in front for 108 minutes and 10 seconds. And our biggest lead was 24 points early part of the second quarter. Defence, 12 more in our favour in terms of tackles. Tackles inside forward 50, we had 7 more than them. 1%ers, the Dogs had 4 more than us. And again, as I said about interchanges, what the bloody hell are we doing? What are we doing? Where's the planning behind this? And it's a quick turnaround, I think, to the Pies game next round, because the Pies obviously coming off a bye, so they're going to have fresh legs, and coming off a really hard fought game under the tin shed in the Marvel shithouse stadium, because it was like a sauna. Every time it's not even hot, when it's warm weather outside, it is an absolute sauna in there, and it would be taxing for the players. So that gets back to that point. Why are we not using our full interchanges, or at least, to the extent of what the Dogs did? Just poor management, really bad mismanagement. In terms of second halves this season, just want to talk to the fact that the scoreline looks as such. So this is second halves of the season. So Carlton kicked 8-19-67 to the opposition, 22 goals, 12 behinds, 156. So we're almost conceding 100 points more in second halves than what we're scoring. And, that's the second half issue that I'm referring to. Like, we fall off a cliff defensively, and then in an attacking sense, we fade into obscurity. We are 0-6 for second halves in terms of quarters one, which is telling. And it does indicate that our style is not sustainable at all. How we play is not sustainable. We look good early, but that's half a game. If you can't sustain that for 4 quarters, physically, mentally, and when we get found out, we've got no plan B, why are we not tweaking things from week to week? Why are we not preventing this second half fade out? Sitting in the seat, our seats are right near where the coaches go up and down the stands to entry point to the to on field, and spotted Graham Wright and Brad Lloyd walking the boundary during one of the quarter breaks, and it fills me with a little bit of confidence. It's not could be classified as Schadenfreude, because you're kind of smiling at the fact that if things don't change, that a guy of Graham Wright's standing and, I guess, fierce determination for success will not stand back or sit on his hands and say, I'm not going to do anything. He will make changes. So that, in a sense, is a bit of a positive, I think, out of the negatives. Because if things don't change, he will implement change virtually. Spoken about, playing Evans, all that sort of stuff. He should not be in the team. If we're relying upon a bloke that's been delisted by 2 previous teams, like we need to bring in a rule where we do not recruit a player that has been delisted, unwanted by 2 previous teams. And the fact that we're having to rely upon him now just shows how bad our depth is, and how bad the benchmark and expectations are for players if he's getting a game. And that's nothing against him as a person. He might be a ripper bloke, but, mate, you're not a footballer. I'm sorry. You're not going to be offering anything to us at senior level. It's the same old issues. Second half fade out. Happening against the Tigers, like worse than a lot, obviously. Last week against the Hawks, now the Dogs. And, it's frustrating, especially after such a fast start, when it gives you hope and you're like, well, can we sustain this? That's the next question. But deep down that we can't, because we've faltered. Even dating back to late last year. And it's frustrating because Voss has been so strong in his wording in the press conference when the media's called into question the inability of the side to finish games properly, run out games. And he counters that with, like last week, he did it in the presser post-game, saying that I have no doubt this, let's have no doubts about it, he virtually said. This team finishes well. Well, Vossi, you might want to reassess that, mate, because we do not finish games well at all. there's something else I wanted to talk about, but it slipped my mind because I am utterly exhausted. I'm I'm just so exhausted. And what's worse is that we're going to face the Pies next week. And again, it tends to happen where we find ourselves in a spot where the next week we face an arch rival like Collingwood, who, we've kind of been compared to because they're at a different end of the spectrum. They've gone all in. They obviously went for the player that we didn't go for in Houston. They're at the higher end of, the age bracket compared to us. And people are saying they could fall off a cliff. And yet we've done that with the same list virtually as 2024 and as 2023. Give or take a few players. Yet we've fallen off a cliff. And Collingwood, they continue to compete. They continue to win games in light of expectation. And we've done the opposite. So I'm not looking forward to that game at all. Like, I'll be there, of course. I go every week, every home game, even away with my AFL membership, because I'm an absolute sucker for this team. And yeah, I just don't know at what point it's going to come to a head and the club's going to realise that we have put ourselves in this position. I've spoken about it previously, and I'll refer to here the lack of support that we've had around previous coaches that persists, the lack of change that we've had around senior coaches that persists. I'm talking about Brendan Bolton when I was, back working at the club as a videographer, heading up the video team in 2018, and I saw within the four walls firsthand, that, Neil Craig was the senior assistant, Bolton being relatively inexperienced, first, senior coaching gig, needed that help. Neil Craig finished up and he wasn't replaced, and Bolton was just at sea. Assistant coaches, they virtually held on for when Teague took over. Teague, another inexperienced coach, didn't have someone like a Neil Craig. The club did not rehire a senior assistant coach to help out. And now they've done it in a form of Ash Hansen, who doesn't have senior coaching experience. And I think if you look across the AFL landscape, a lot of those senior assistant coaches have had some sort of senior coaching experience because they've been there, they've done that. They can, I guess, impart knowledge and experience on the senior coach that no other coach can, assistant coach that hasn't had the taste of coaching at senior level. And then obviously I'm referring to here, when Teague was given the ass, it was, these guys were too inexperienced. Nothing to do with the fact that they didn't have the right assistant coaching structure around them to support them. No, nothing about that at all. It's because these coaches were inexperienced. So therefore, we need to go for an experienced coach. And at the time, all we had on offer was Ross Lyon and Michael Voss. Ross Lyon, of course, having been there, done that, arguably passed it. I was happy that we didn't go for him. But then to settle for the coach that was applying for so many different senior coaching gigs and was getting knocked back in Michael Voss, we went for him because he had experience, despite the fact that he failed at Brisbane. And it came off the back again of our past behaviours and our inability to provide support to previous senior coaches, and creating this false narrative that it was due to the fact that the coaches themselves, the senior coaches in Bolton and Teague, didn't have experience. And we somehow needed, off the back of that, experience. So again, we painted ourselves into this corner. If we provided experience around Teague and Bolton, I have no doubt that the club probably would have looked at things differently and thought, you know what? We'll maybe give Kingsley a crack. He's been around the traps for a fair while. He's done his apprenticeship. He's renowned for being a pretty good tactician, as we can see now. at the helm of the Giants, he is a very, very good senior coach. He's hard-edged. He, has expectations of players that I wish Michael Voss had, but it's just not there. Let's have a quick look in terms of the press. I'm not going to watch the presser because it's just going to really annoy the shit out of me. But there's an article that's written on the AFL website called Lack of Composure Behind the Blues 0-3 Start as Worrying Trend Emerges. And, Voss always looking at the positives. Again, there's a time and place. There's looking at positives, but there's also looking at negatives, which he refuses to do by and large. He said the numbers stack up okay, which, I went through. There were a couple of nice sort of columns there that worked in our favour, but by and large, they told the tale. He says here in this article, it just felt like we lacked composure for different times throughout the game, which is true. He says right now our best has been pretty good, but we just seem to be straying from us more than we'd like. It's giving little pockets of windows for an opposition to walk through. We're inviting them into the game, which again is referring to the unsustainable structure and nature of how we play the game. That's probably not giving enough credit to the opposition because you've still got to show up and you've got to be able to get that done. I'd like to think they know I appreciate that. It does take an opposition to be able to step up, but the consistency of what we need to be able to play at is clearly not where we want it. We're really confident in the manner of the way we play. Don't know about that. I could spend a lot of times on the numbers, but it's not going to matter because the numbers stack up okay. Again, they do not stack up okay. Have a look at our second halves. Those are the numbers that do not stack up okay. And talking about this is selective, bias in a sense that he's trying to pull out the positives from, the micro positives as opposed to the macro negatives. And it's using selective bias in a way that paints a rosier picture on things, which it's not. And again, he said it's these small moments that is enabling the opposition to be able to get back in the game. It's been on our boot and we haven't been able to finish the deal. We have to own that. But again, those deficiencies. I will say the one positive that came out of today or tonight was our ball use coming out of defensive 50. I think there was a lot of unpredictability about it in terms of switching the play and moving the ball very, very quickly and getting out of defence quite smoothly. And I think that was probably the best that I've seen us move the ball out of defence all season. So that's a big tick. But the entries inside forward 50, they were okay. It was an improvement, but it wasn't the best and it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't consistent. Look at that stat. I mean, they're different seasons, but now won just 2 of its last 12 games, dating back to last season when we beat North Melbourne and West Coast. And again, we're talking about selective bias. Like Voss has said that, we've won the inside 50 count, 56-51 in the clearance battle, and suggested that the Blues can still turn around their stuttering fortunes. It doesn't matter how many inside 50s you win. It's how many are converted to scoring opportunities. And again, it is not enough. It just shits me. He sits there with a big smirk on his face. Like, mate, look at the numbers. The numbers that you're referring to that apparently paint the picture of, something that's rosier. If they were rosy, we would be winning games. Look at the deficiencies. I have no doubt that if Sam Mitchell was at the helm, he'd be looking at the negatives and being like, these are deficiencies we need to work on. Yes, there were positives, but we didn't win the game, so it's not worth mentioning. Look at the negatives. And then he talks about, in terms of the context of the season we're at the start, there's plenty of runway, but we've also got feedback to suggest we've got to get better, no doubt, of course. We've got some real parts of our game that would be a bit more obvious than others. That's what we'll do. When you watch us play and you see the other parts of our games and you see how we're able to play that, it's worth persisting with. Well, if it's not sustainable, it's not, mate. And it gets back to that point of what I'm referring to here of stubbornness as a coach. If something is not working And it dates back to last year, same thing, second half of the season, when he had no plan B, him and the assistant coaches. It is not worth persisting with. If it is not sustainable, we may look good for half a game, but if we fade out of the game due to lack of fitness, lack of structure, whatever, it is not worth persisting with. Because he is going down a path now of persisting to the point of us losing game after game and his head being put on a spike. And he says, but the message will be pretty simple from me. Make sure we get really clear on our roles, continue to keep playing us, just lip service, and at the right times we need to put composure in the game. We'll keep coaching that. Well, it's not going to work. I'm sorry, it is not going to work. A new age coach is someone that can adapt to change, is someone that can, learn from mistakes, someone that can work on deficiencies and not be head in the sand, stubbornness, because at the end of the day, this stubbornness is what we saw in the first part of 2023. And it's what almost got him sacked that season until he finally tweaked things. Is it going to take that again for him to tweak things, to have his job on the line? Because it is getting to that point. And I think I'm already at that point, really. I've seen it enough. I am sick of, stubbornness. I'm sick of being paid lip service. I'm sick of these deficiencies not being fixed, not being worked on. There are small positives, as I said, but there are glaring negatives and glaring deficiencies that are just persisting week after week. And we will not win games against quality opposition. And the Dogs, to their credit, are quality opposition, even despite the fact that they've lost, big pillars in Bont, Treloar, Ugle-Hagan. They're still a very, very good team and probably should have beat the Pies the previous week. But again, where we are at the moment, where we should be beating these sides. We should be beating the Dogs. We should be pushing and at least beating the Hawks. And we should most definitely be beating the Tigers. So where we're at the moment, we're not in a rebuilding phase. We're not in, the market for, honourable losses. We're not about fighting out games. It's more than that. We've got a list that should be contending. We've got a list that should be, at the very least, be contending in the top 8. And I think, at the very least, in top 4. That's not going to happen. You can say it almost now, because if you are going to persist and be resilient in your lack of wanting to alter your game plan, if you're going to persist, you are not going to persist as senior coach. Your assistant coaching staff are not going to persist in the roles they're currently in. And I think as the senior coach, the buck stops with you. The assistant coaches have say in their lines as a forwards, midfields, defensive coach. But if you are saying that you are persisting with things, if you think, things don't need to be tweaked, and it's just going to click, it won't. Take it from me, it will not. It will not. Take it from every Carlton supporter. It will not. We're telling you, it will not. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of things here, but, I don't want this video to go for too long, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing my raspy voice talking through this, because I need some rest, because it's just post-match, and, I figured I'd record this early just to get it off my chest. And previous couple of reviews, I've taken more than enough time to, dwell on things and, calm down a bit. But, I don't want to forget about things. And I want to touch on these things that are fresh in my mind, as they are with you, no doubt. But let us know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section down below. Where are you at? Are you at the point where I am, where it's just beyond frustrating? It's beyond, beyond persisting with, we'll chat a bit more about, obviously, Collingwood up next week in our preview of that game. But this game in isolation, there were positives, yes, but that's just the same shit. It's the same deficiencies. And that's that. So we'll end things there. We'll leave it there. As I said, leave your thoughts down below. We'll use this as a bit of a therapy session. And yeah, with that, we'll catch you in the next one. All the very best. Go Baggers.